Hello everyone, I'd like to retouch this photo for you today. We're going to focus on using a couple of tools that will be really handy in your efforts to restore photos or even just in the photos that you work on regularly. Before we get started, there are a couple of keyboard shortcuts that you ought to use. You'll use them all the time. The first one is just Control plus. Control plus allows you to zoom in and do a lot of that detail work. The second one is Control minus. Using these two commands, you're going to be able to do a lot of the detail work to refine your edges and make everything look really good, and then Control minus to zoom out and appreciate the difference and evaluate the overall look. Beyond that, there is a hand tool, but you're going to find that it's far more handy if you're doing a bunch of painting on this image. It's going to be a lot easier to move around just by pressing on the space bar. The space bar will let you get around your canvas a whole lot faster than you would just by grabbing these scroll bars. I mean, we want to forget about the fact that we're working with a computer and just focus on the artwork itself and get the image restored. Now, the first step that a lot of people go through tends to be to duplicate the background image. For me, I don't like to duplicate the entire background unless I need the entire background, because it's going to make my file size effectively twice as big. So the first step that I'm going to do is just going to make a new layer, just a new empty layer. Think of it as a layer of transparency that will lay over the top of this picture, just like your middle school teacher used to do. And on that transparency, we can lay a bunch of cover-up that will cover all of this damage and basically make it look as though none of the damage was there. So to get started, we'll press Control-Shift-N or Command-Shift-N for you Mac people, and I'm going to give it a name. We'll just call this one Retouch. Photoshop expresses things that are transparent in a checkerboard rather than making it white like we would normally see on a computer screen. White might make us think that we're looking at a bunch of white paint or white pixels. So to differentiate it from that, it's going to look like a bunch of checkerboard. We have two layers now, and we can turn them on and off to see what they do. This one is empty, so there's no difference there. And the background is everything. So when I turn that off, we can see the transparent background. So to get started, I'm going to use the clone stamper. You just tap your S key and you will have the clone stamper. And we need to zoom in nice and tight to look at some of this damage. Alright, I actually want this little piece above his brow, so holding down my space bar and clicking and dragging, I can move around, because I never want to reach for scroll bars. That's archaic, that's computer stuff. We're artists here. So here's my first scratch. I want to take a look at that scratch. The first thing you're going to want to do when you're working with the clone stamper tool is to change the default setting for sample. By default, the clone stamper likes to sample the current layer. Well, I'm trying to paint into a new layer, so there's nothing to borrow from. This layer is empty. If I, for any reason, have this set to current layer, all of my clicking is going to do nothing. I'm not going to paint anything. I want the sample, or the thing I'm going to borrow, to be any underlying layers, so that my overall effect will be a merge of everything that I can see that's below this layer. When I Alt-click, holding down my Alt key, I get a little target, and I click somewhere in the good area. This right here is a good area of forehead to start with, so I will Alt-click there. Once I've done that, you can see as I move around the screen that my brush is a little sampling of that piece of forehead. If I Alt-click on his eyeball here, then I can effectively put eyeball wherever I want it. And that's the way the stamper works, is I'm going to paint with that selection. As I click and drag, I put that eyeball right there, and as I continue to drag, you can see that I have both a brush, and then down below where the original eye is, I have a crosshair. That's going to move. So as I paint, I'm going to keep painting the area around where I'm stroking. So it's it's a good practice to keep your eye on both of those to make sure you don't stray into a bad spot and paint something you don't need. I'm going to press Control Z to undo that. This brush, for what I'm about to do, is way too big. There are a couple of really easy ways to resize that. I, for one, never come up here and do a bunch of size adjustments. My brain doesn't think in terms of pixels, and I can't pick out a hardness level out of the air that's going to be of any use to me. But there's a really simple shortcut that'll do that. You have two bracket keys under your plus and minus keys. If you press the left one, your brush will automatically get smaller. If you press your right one, it'll get larger. So left bracket, smaller, right bracket, larger. If I hold down my Shift key and do that, then my brush gets firmer. See how it's a perfect circle now? Or softer, so that I can do a little bit more blended work. I'm going to make my brush mostly hard, about like that, and about the size of the cracks. I don't want to overpaint this. I want to preserve as much of the original as I can. So enough talking, let's get to painting this thing, and we'll see how it goes. I'll alt-click here and do a little click on that dot there, alt-click again, paint that one out. So as I alt-click, I'm trying to alt-click on things that are very visually similar to what I want to put into place. And the nice thing is the little brush preview makes it really obvious the way that it's going to appear. We can actually preview before we do the painting. Now right here I have a dark piece of forehead with a transition, a gray transition that goes into white. So as I paint this, I want to follow that transition as much as possible. I'll alt-click up here and start to paint, and as I go to the left, that's a pretty good match, and as I go to the right, it will match as well. Looks like I got a little bit dark here because it went into that dark area. No matter, I'll just alt-click again and we'll fix that little part that didn't look as good. So now let's do a few more dots, and then I'll demonstrate the difference between this and the healer. The thing that you'll notice about the stamp tool, I'm alt-clicking and painting, is that the clone stamp is not a forgiving tool. It's going to paint exactly what you sample by alt-clicking. I'll come over here and try this little dot on his forehead. Hopefully it's not a birthmark of some kind. I don't know this gentleman's face well enough. But as I go through this, I can paint these little dots out and do that to my heart's content. And I could probably spend years actually just getting dots taken out, but we want to do this pretty quickly, so I'll demonstrate some more things. Down here we've got a pretty large one. I want to hit the large things first. Now you see what I did there? I didn't sample a very good area, so it's the wrong amount of contrast. It sticks right out. It's probably just as obvious as the original. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to grab my healer, because the healer works very similarly to the stamper, but it has the added benefit of blending it for us automatically by looking at the surrounding area and blending it all together. Now there are a few healers. If you hold down your mouse button on here, the spot healer is something that I never use. The spot healer will be the one that's selected by default, but the disadvantage of it is it's going to do your alt-clicking spot for you. And I've run into trouble where it doesn't like to alt-click for me in a spot that's going to be helpful. So I use the second one. It lets me be an intelligent artist where I pick my own sample spots and work to my liking. So it works very similarly to the stamper tool. I can alt-click in an area. Now notice I'm not going to be too judicious because I want to kind of show off what this tool can do. I'll alt-click here in this piece of cheek because the cheek is clear, which is all I'm really caring about. And I'll do a little circle. Now I'm holding down my mouse button and you can see my crosshair and my brush, and you might say, hey Adam, that looks terrible, you're doing a bad job. The advantage of this tool is as soon as I let go of my button, it will take what I've painted and try to blend it with the surrounding area. 1, 2, 3, go. Pretty good, huh? Now the thing that we're going to admire here is that normally I wouldn't paint in an area of so much contrast, but as I go, I'll pick a similar area here, alt-click and paint, and when I let go, it auto-blends it, and it looks fantastic. So you may be asking yourself at this point, Adam, why would I ever use the clone stamper if the healing brush does all of that blending stuff and makes everything look nice automatically? Well, there are a few things that, because of the auto blend, you're going to want to be very skillful with a clone stamper instead. Let's go over here, for example. We've got this difficult area along his jawline. If you look at that, I'm kind of scratching my head at that right now because I have to recreate that basically from scratch. There's not a lot of actual jawline that still exists there. And so this would be a case where building up the jaw using a lot of stamping would be helpful. But watch what happens when I try to rebuild a jawline using the healing tool. We'll just rebuild that little bit there, come around to there, and when I let go, yeah, it's created a bit of a smudge. And honestly, that may not bother a lot of people, but it's too bright and it's not looking all that great. We're going to have to finesse that a little bit. But you can see why. Let me do a Control Z for undo. If I do stamping instead with my S tool, I can very slowly build this up. So there's one pass, and notice when I let go it does not blend, so I'm okay there. Now maybe I'll borrow some backdrop, alt-click on the backdrop and build some of that up on the other side. And I'll just try to follow that neckline along a little bit. I can actually restore his jawline pretty well using a bunch of clone stamping. I want to make the clone stamp a little bit softer using my shift bracket key so that I can create that transition area. So I'm just following along like that. And oops, you can see right here I started to borrow this dark area up here and it's copying it. Your sample area is going to follow you, so you need to be aware of that. I'm going to alt-click over here and cover that up and then just keep on going. Like that. Oh, see what happened there? Now, for something like this, I would probably fix this crack first. If I fix the small cracks, then I can use this to fix larger cracks. So I'm going to want to do that. But let's just take a minute and appreciate what we've done so far. Now looking at this, I'm already discouraged because I've spent all this time and it looks terrible still. But let's turn the retouch layer off, just clicking on the little eyeball here. There have been quite a few improvements here. Now you're going to go a whole lot faster because you're not talking the whole time that you do it, so that's your benefit. If I turn off my background layer, I can actually see just the little squiggles that I've painted. All of that is 100% my work. So that's kind of a fun thing to appreciate from time to time. So I'm going to just do this in fast forward for a minute, and you can kind of watch me work that way. And then as I come to trouble areas that I think I need to identify the problems, I'll slow it down and I can talk to you about them. So I'll be right back. here's a good area to address. We've got a bit of a transition area, and like I said, if you alt-click in the right spot, I'll alt-click right here because it's at about the same angle as this neckline up here. I'll alt-click there, and I can line it right up. See, if I go this way, I know I'm off. If I go that way, I know I'm off. But I'll line it up just right with my stamper and go up and down, and that has taken care of that. Looks pretty good. I'll do the same thing on this side of the transition. So alt-click there and go up just a little bit and down just a little bit, and that's pretty good. In the Photoshop business, it's all about these selling illusions. We're selling the idea that everything's perfect. So we do that time and time again. We'll alt-click up here, paint over to the right, and that looks just fine. We've got this jawline here, so I'll alt-click down in the jawline below and then follow it up ever so gently and down. Looks pretty good. So there you have it. One thing that is important to note that's a difference between your stamper and your healer is the default setting of alignment. When I click on, when I do my alt-click sample for the stamper, it is automatically aligned. If I alt-click here, you see that relationship there? Those two the brush and the crosshair will always maintain that relationship. Let me switch to the healer. The shortcut key is J. If I alt-click here and start painting, you can see how those are apart. But now I'll retouch this. That cross is in the same spot. Look again, I'll come over here. Cross is in the same spot. By default, the healing brush is not aligned, meaning that you can sample one good area and potentially reuse it several times. I can go there, and that's fine because all of these areas really require nearly the same kind of work. So that's the way I want my healer to respond. You'll find that you have to sample a whole lot more when you're using the clone stamper, and that's okay because you want the exact copy to be something that you have deliberately chosen, something that's going to look good. Let's paint that out. Something you may also find, you notice what I did there. Let me undo and demonstrate that again. As I paint down, watch what happens. Why am I suddenly painting with the crack again? Well, it's because Photoshop does not apply the paint until I've released the button. So that crack that I covered up is still there, and now I'm painting with it because my little crosshair has strayed into that. So you want to be careful, and as a general rule of thumb, I don't like to do long strokes with either one of these tools because if I do a lot of little strokes, if I mess up, there's a lot less to undo. It makes things a lot quicker as far as getting my work back. So anyway, I will speed up the video and continue on this image. This is something that you want to watch out for when you're healing and stamping, and that is repeating patterns. Right here I've got this divot, and right here I've got another divot that's very similar to it, and it looks like he's almost got this ripple in his shirt. That's because I did pretty much an exact copy here and then placed it there. If I turn off my work, you can see how much of it needed replacing. So this is a good opportunity to grab your healer and just randomize things a little bit. Maybe click up here, do a little pass over that, let go. Yeah, see that already, before, after, just using my undo key. Now it's a smooth sort of lapel or collar and not just this ripply thing. So that's something to be aware of. You also notice here that I had to do a lot with the stamper because it was such radical reconstruction of all of this area. It was just too much to do, and so you want to build it up, and that's my general workflow. I build this all up, get it all established with the stamper, and then as it needs blending I can go back over it to blend it all together with the healer as needed. So you can kind of consider the stamper to be your base coat, and then you can finesse everything else with the healer once you're done. So, alright, I'm almost done here. And there you have it. That is my finished photo. There's some stuff going on in the hair that I might address, but really, unless someone's sticking their nose against the photo, they're not going to notice it. And you have to kind of keep that in mind as you're doing this, that not everyone is going to evaluate it up super close. So rather than reconstruct a bunch of black pixel hair, I think I'm going to call it done here. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video today. I hope that everything works for you well. If you have any questions about the way that I did this, you can leave me those questions at the site with the link in the comments section. Also, I will leave a link to the original photo so that you can practice on it if you wish, and you can find that in the link below as well. So thank you very much for watching today, and happy photoshopping. Bye.